You cannot get away from the fact that these are highly processed foods, and they come with all of the baggage that highly processed foods come with for people. And we all know from our own health that the more processed foods we eat, the worse things can be for us. And yet we do it every day for our pets.
I had this cat before I started my practice. He was 21 when he passed away. He passed away a couple of years ago. Just amazing. I actually did acupuncture on him quite often. And,
Great.
I tried putting little herbs in his, I fed him liver quite often too. I don't know if that helped or not, but
I'm sure that it did. Number one, your level of stress and anxiety is not affecting your pet. You got another thing coming because they know exactly what's going on with you. And if you're not happy on a regular basis, it definitely affects them. And certainly for people who maybe live in a, shall we say, a somewhat tumultuous household, rocky relationship, a lot of arguments, 8,000 kids in one house, that can be rough on pets.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. It's Reagan Archibald, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Gary Richter. He is the #1 Amazon best-selling author of The Ultimate Pet Health Guide. He's a graduate of the University of Florida in animal science and as well as veterinary medical science and a doctorate of veterinary medicine with honors. And so Gary's been, I've had the chance to get to know Gary over the last year, and he's been just a phenomenal source of insight for, what to feed your pets and how to help your pets live longer. Because I don't know if you're like me, but I love my little dogs. I had a cat that lived to be 21. I think I told you about him, Gary, but Gary, the most exciting thing that you've got coming up, and one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show is because you've got 2 amazing books coming out. One is called Longevity for Dogs, and the other one is Longevity for Cats. And so, Gary, welcome to Unreasonable Health.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
And Gary, when you look at kind of veterinary medicine, I guess if you say, what would you say your biggest frustration is with the way that veterinary medicine was practiced, or the way that you were taught it originally?
Oh my, that's a broad question. There's an awful lot of problems with sort of the Western medical model, both veterinary and humans. But I mean, I would say probably, broadly speaking, the biggest frustrating point is the entire model is set up to be reactive. So in other words, everything's set up to fix problems when they occur and not really to prevent problems from happening. Outside of vaccinations, there really is very little preventative medicine that's practiced in the veterinary space. And to me, it's just counterintuitive and problematic.
Yeah. The reactive medicine, same thing in human medicine. And so if you look at, I was, in chatting with you, if you look at the biggest mistake that pet owners make when it comes to taking care of the health of their animals, what would you say it is?
I would say the most impactful, the most negatively impactful thing that most people do is what they wind up feeding their pets.
Okay. Which is like usually processed byproducts of human manufactured food is what in doing some research, I guess that's still how dog food's made and cat food.
It is. I mean, it's not always byproducts these days, but I mean, that's certainly, byproducts and meat meal are still a big piece of pet food. But even for the foods that are not that, I mean, I think the bottom line is if you look at dry dog food like kibble or canned food, and that's true for cats as well, is you cannot get away from the fact that these are highly processed foods, and they come with all of the baggage that highly processed foods come with for people. And we all know from our own health that the more processed foods we eat, the worse things can be for us. And yet we do it every day for our pets. And yet most veterinarians recommend exactly that for their patients. I mean, And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I mean, nutrition is the cornerstone of health and longevity. Like, if
Yeah.
you're not doing that right, then you can forget about all the rest of the stuff, because what's the point?
Yeah, and if you kind of use an analogy, I mean, like what would dogs and cats be eating if they were, feral, for example?
Sure. And the way that I look at nutrition is, the first question to ask is really kind of the one you just asked, which is, what did that animal evolve to thrive on, nutritionally speaking? And
Yeah.
then, speaking broadly, every animal on the planet evolved to thrive on a fresh whole food diet. Now, certainly, the more specific nutritional requirements for, say, a dog or a cat or a person are going to be somewhat different. Everybody evolved eating fresh whole foods. So that's got to be where we start. Nobody evolved eating food out of a bag or a can. And there's all kinds of problems that come with that. So really the place to start is, how do we get them on a properly balanced, fresh whole food diet, whether that is something that you're buying in a store or online, ready made, and those things are absolutely available now, or if it's something that you want to make at home, which is absolutely possible to do. You just need to work off of a recipe so you know that your pet's getting all the nutrition they need. You can't just put meat and vegetables in a bowl and call it good. But having said all that, that's really the place to start. Fresh whole foods. I mean, not exactly a rocket science concept, but yet at the same time, it's something that is rarely thought about in mainstream medicine.
Man. And if you look at like some of the, like, how could people essentially spot symptoms when their pets need different nutrition?
Yeah. And, I mean, the good news, bad news about a biological system is that it's incredibly forgiving, which I think is a reason why, somebody can basically live their life eating at McDonald's and still feel like they're relatively healthy into their 50s or even older. But somewhere along the line, those chickens are going to come home to roost. So, when it comes to animals, oftentimes it's something subtle. They may be slowing down a little bit. Their hair coat may not be as good as possible. They could be achy. They might have digestive issues. All kinds of things that, that people can and regularly do write off for other reasons, or just say, oh, they're just getting a little older, they're slowing down. I mean, none of that is really the case. There's always a cause for this kind of stuff. And I mean, what you're not going to see in almost every, any case is, like, you're not going to be seeing signs of like a clinical vitamin deficiency. Like, that's not the, it's not going to be that dramatic. What's,
Right.
the way I sort of often liken it to with people is, like, if you think about your car, your car is designed to run optimally on certain things, certain type of gas, certain type of oil, various other fluids. And as long as you're putting the right fluids in, your car is going to run as good as mechanically it is able to do. If I put the wrong kind of gas in my car, chances are my car will still run, at least for a little while, but it's
Mhm.
not going to run as well as it should. And it's probably going to be a lot more prone to breaking down because it's not running the way that it should. The only difference with a biological system is it takes longer to break.
Yeah.
And by the time it does, you're in trouble, because
Yep.
replacement parts are harder to get than they are for my car.
Yeah, it's like that old concept, when's the best time to dig a well? It's like, well, before you're thirsty. And
Yes.
it's the
Yes.
same time, it's the same thing with nutrition. It's like, when's the best time to take care of your pet? Well, it's not when you start seeing problems, when, your dog's, gaining weight. And I see a lot of really heavy, like obese dogs running
Sure you
around.
do. Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of your patients, they're obese. And is it mostly like, is it the processed food? Are they overeating? I mean, what is it?
It's gosh, there's so many factors there. I mean, certainly, the fact that most dogs are eating kibble doesn't help, because kibble is incredibly high in carbohydrates, frequently somewhere like 60 or 70% carbs. So, I mean, most
Whoa.
dogs are no different than with people, that if you're eating excess carbs, you're probably putting on weight.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the fact that because of how busy people are, a lot of dogs, just like their owners, are not getting the exercise that they should. And also there's that whole sort of food is love thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, dogs, like a lot of people, they do enjoy eating. It is fun. And there is a difference between I want to eat and I need to eat. But when the dog puts on those puppy dog eyes and asks for food, a lot of people just that's their manifestation of love for their dog, when in reality, probably getting them out for a half-hour walk would be the much better thing for the person and the animal.
I know. Oh man, I've got two standard poodles, and you're right. Like they can give you just the sweetest look, and it's like, man, I would just that chicken or whatever I'm eating, that looks really, really good. Can I just a
Right.
little, and it's hard not to, but luckily my wife has trained me really tightly. And I often say, and I think I've jokingly said this to you in previous conversations, I said, when I die, I want to be one of my wife's pets because she takes really good care of them.
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah, I have a number of clients that I would be happy to be a dog in their house.
No kidding. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's fascinating because you have not only, do you have your veterinary clinic that's incredibly successful, but you've also got your ultimate pet nutrition store. So this is where anybody can go, and do they have to be clients of yours, or
Not at all.
they can go and you've got some really amazing things in the store. But what was it that gave you the insight to have this online store?
Yeah, I mean, I think the motivation behind both, the food and the supplements with Ultimate Pet Nutrition, as well as the books, really comes from two things. The first one is I think that there's a lot of information out there that pet owners need to know about how to take best care of their pet, and unfortunately, there's a pretty good chance they're not getting that from their general practice veterinarian, because that's just not how veterinarians are educated.
Yeah.
I wasn't taught any of that stuff in school. This is stuff that I've figured out in 25 years of veterinary practice. And the other reason for doing all this is I realized a long time ago that if my goal was going to be to help as many animals as possible, I had to figure out a way to do it that went beyond whatever is the finite number of pets that I can see in my office every day. And that's what started the books and the supplements and the food, because this is a way that I can become available to a lot more people and be able to provide them with both the products and the information to take better care of their animals.
Man, yeah, that's powerful because how many of your patients who come in, how many of them have some type of chronic issue that's been undiagnosed, or that the pet owner, they love their animal almost more than anything else in the world, but their pets are walking around with a disease, a lifestyle-based disease.
Oh, sure. We see it all the time. And it's very, very common in my office for us to have people come in that have been to multiple other veterinarians, frequently veterinary specialists, and they haven't gotten any resolution, or the resolution is put the dog on steroids. The thing about a lot of Western medicine, and again, you're well aware of this, is so much of Western medicine is it's just treating symptoms. It's frequently not actually addressing the underlying disease. I laughed. I saw a commercial on TV the other day where somebody was at a state fair and they were eating all of this crappy food and complaining about heartburn. And it was an ad for some heartburn medication. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, the solution to your problem is to stop eating that crap. But that's not what we do. Why address the underlying problem when you can just cover up the symptom with medication? Which maybe as a short-term fix works out well, but as a long-term fix, it never does.
Yeah, no doubt. I love the irony couldn't be thicker when you're at the fair eating hot dogs. Anyone's going to get acid reflux.
I know, it's crazy.
So longevity for dogs. What are some of the core things? I mean, I know the book's coming out and I know how much work goes into the book, but what makes this book, Longevity for Dogs, Longevity for Cats, different than the other books you've written?
Sure. I mean, the other book, The Ultimate Pet Health Guide, was really a look at how to practice and implement integrative medicine to help your pet. And it really looks at a lot of very specific medical conditions that we commonly see and how to manage them from both a Western and a holistic perspective. The new books are a much more kind of directed look at where we are as far as longevity science goes. And, and I'm sure that most, if not all of your listeners are well aware of that, longevity science is a very active field of research these days. And the fascinating thing about it is that a lot of what's being done in humans on the longevity medicine side of things, there are not really particularly good clinical trials in people for those things, and B, a lot of the trials that have been done are actually done in animals. So so in many ways, a lot of that stuff is more applicable to veterinary medicine than it may even be for humans.
Such a good point.
So I really kind of start from the ground up in these books and start with very, very easy things that any pet owner can implement on their own. So diet, lifestyle, exercise, like these are the foundational aspects of good health and longevity. This is where you have to start, because there's plenty of discussion in there about Western medical care and an extensive look at supplements and peptides and regenerative medicine and all the really sort of sexy technological cutting edge stuff. But the reality is if you're doing all that stuff and you're not dealing with the diet, lifestyle, and exercise aspect of it, you're effectively building a house on sand. There's nothing to support that stuff. Yeah. So, that's what I always tell people is start with the easy stuff. It's cheap. It's easy. You can do it at home. You really don't need me for it. But once that's done, like if people really want to take it that next step and say, I really want to, to use Dave Asprey's term, biohack my dog or my cat so that I can dramatically extend their quality and quantity of life, that's when we're going to talk about, let's talk about supplements. Let's talk about peptides. Let's talk about regenerative medicine. All that stuff is available, to us. And when used appropriately in the right animals, in the right order, we can see really, really profound effects.
I love that. And if you look at the average lifespan of like a cat, for example, what have you seen when your clients start working with you and they start, they've got the foundation built up, but now they're like, let's try some peptides. Let's do, and I know you do some phenomenal work with stem cells too, which I just think is amazing because, Gary's the go-to if you really want to extend your pet's life, because he's doing therapies that most vets haven't even taken the time to look into. But what can someone expect, or what do you see in your patients?
Yeah, cats are a real interesting thing for you to bring up, because like the sort of average lifespan of a cat can be really pretty broad. Like, if somebody has a 14 or a 15-year-old cat that passes away, it's sad, but it's not, it's not shocking. Right. But at the same time, you can see cats go 20, 21, and even north of that. So of course the question there becomes, and this is exactly the same question that gets asked when you see super centenarians, people well over 100, of like, what's going on here? Like, why did that person live that long and everybody else is dead? Some of it's clearly genetics, but a lot of it is not. A lot of it's the stuff we're talking about. It's diet, it's lifestyle. In our case, it's being able to manage chronic problems so that they don't snowball into issues. It's very, very common in my office to have patients come in that, other veterinarians have said, wow, your dog or your cat probably has 6 months maybe. And then lo and behold, 2 years later, we're still sitting around having that conversation. That's such a gift for people. I think for most people, our pets are family. And while, they certainly don't live as long as we would like them to, I think, to be able to give people literally years more of good quality of life is, how do you put a price on that?
Right. Yeah. I had a cat that I brought from Hawaii. And I had this cat before I started my practice. He was 21 when he passed away. He passed away a couple of years ago. Just amazing. And I don't really know. I actually did acupuncture on him quite often.
Great.
I tried putting little herbs in his, I fed him liver quite often too. I don't know if that helped or not, but
I'm
just been
sure that it did.
yeah. And you're trained in acupuncture, veterinary acupuncture.
Yes. Yeah, we do a lot of acupuncture in my office, both dogs and cats. I find that in general they respond very, very well. And I think a lot of people sort of intuitively think that that would be difficult to do from the standpoint of the animal tolerating it. The truth of the matter is I think they do better with it than most people do. Probably has something to do with the fact that they have no innate fear of needles.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, you put the needles in and they fall asleep.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed too. Sometimes they'll act like it's an itch, and
Yeah.
certain needles, and they flip them out. But most of the time, my dogs and cats, I don't have any cats right now, but historically, they would just, they just mellow out. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
In my school, I had a vet that was taking an acupuncture course at the school I went to. And when he went in with his very first patient in our internship, he came out like 5 minutes later and his eyes were just wide open. His name's Curtis. And I'm like, Curtis, what's wrong? And he's like, the patient talks back. It's so weird. It was just because he'd been a vet for about 20 years.
That's funny. Yeah. It'd be weird to get verbal feedback from a patient. I've never had that experience.
It just blew his context,
I can totally understand that.
I bet you could. So what's the difference in longevity for dogs versus longevity for cats?
You mean from the perspective of the books?
Well, or just from a lifestyle, or is there certain foods that cats do better with, or is
Sure. Yeah. So needless to say, there's a fair bit of overlap, but, you start at the beginning. So, clearly diet's going to be a little bit different. An optimal nutritional profile for a cat is a little different than a dog. They are truly obligate carnivores. I mean, that's pretty much what they are designed to eat. A dog is more of a kind of a carnivorous leaning omnivore. So what is perfect for a cat and a dog is different. So there's that aspect of things. Certainly from a lifestyle perspective, cats have very different sensibilities than dogs. Part of the whole lifestyle conversation is really, how do you maintain a low stress, low anxiety lifestyle for your pets? I think we all know from our own health that, stress, anxiety, elevated cortisol levels, everything that comes with that is not good for us. Not to say that, everybody's going to have a bad day, but that's not really what it's about. It's about sort of day-to-day stress and anxiety. And I think a lot of people don't really think about that within the context of their pets. If you think that, number one, your level of stress and anxiety is not affecting your pet, you got another thing coming. Because they know exactly what's going on with you. And if you're not happy on a regular basis, it definitely affects them. And certainly for people who maybe live in a, shall we say, a somewhat tumultuous household, rocky relationship, a lot of arguments, 8,000 kids in one house, that can be rough on pets. Yeah. And that can be really difficult for them. And then like people's lifestyle, you really got to think about that when you're getting a pet. You want to get a pet that sort of works within your lifestyle. So for example, if you're the kind of person that works a 14-hour day and you live in a 1-bedroom apartment, you probably don't want to get a super high energy dog. Yeah. That is going to be problematic. It's also going to be problematic when you come home from work and your couch has been eaten because your dog's going crazy. Yep. So like these are things that, that people should really think about, ideally speaking, before they get a pet. But it's a function of, okay, well, maybe there's these facets of my life that are not ideal for my cat, for example. How can I make adjustments that are going to make my cat's life better? So lifestyle changes are, there's differences between dogs and cats. Diet, obviously, difference between dogs and cats. As we kind of move into more of the medical care related stuff, that's when things kind of actually converge a little bit. There's always going to be differences in, say, dosages of supplements and medications and whatnot. But most of that stuff is applicable to dogs and cats. It's really a lot of the foundational things that's going to be really different.
Okay. And it's interesting because you can see so many people from the outside I'm like, why did they get that dog? Like they're so busy and it's hard. You got to kind of bite your tongue but I think you bring up a really good point is the stress that we put on our animals. I look at animals as just like this really enjoyable part of life. And it takes a lot of diligence to make sure that they're well cared for. I mean, it's not easy, but where would you say most people make the mistake in thinking that their animals are emotionally healthy when they're probably got a lot of anxiety?
Sure. And I mean, clearly we're talking about a non-verbal individual.
Right.
So like
Yeah.
you're not going to get verbal feedback. And it really kind of depends on how your pet manifests stress and anxiety. Some of them have a tendency to suffer in silence. And if the person in question is not super observant, or maybe they're just not really knowledgeable about animal behavior, they may not see the subtle clues that would tell them that their pet's having an issue. Or perhaps even worse yet, what they may wind up doing is like they see pets, that are sort of manifesting anxiety either by destructive behavior in the house, cats that are peeing outside of the litter box, any number of things, and they get angry about it. And then it becomes a point of conflict between the owner and the pet, and that just ramps things up even worse. I think one of the biggest issues that we as people have when it comes to dealing with animals is we foolishly make this attempt to try and relate with animals like we would relate to a person, which
Yeah.
is always going to be a fail. I think the reality is that most animals would be very happy to give us what we want if we were actually smart enough to ask them in a way that they understood what we wanted.
Mm.
But truthfully, like we're kind of the dummies in that whole relationship. So part of it is really just about being able to sort of set the stage and like let your pet know what it is that you need them to do or not do. And a lot of times they're going to be amenable to that, particularly with dogs. Cats can be a little bit more challenging because they're cats.
Mhm.
But that notwithstanding, there are sort of ways that you can maintain an appropriate level of stress, an appropriate lifestyle, just by making changes in the house, or like in the case of a dog, getting them out for more exercise, giving them more environmental enrichment, giving them things to do and to think about, instead of just kind of leaving them to their own devices.
Yeah. And that's what I found with we've got the two standard poodles, and if they're not walked by about 3 o'clock, if we don't get them out in the morning, they're, that you can tell, they'll let you know, hey,
Oh yeah, they're getting a little
time.
antsy for
Yeah,
sure.
start pawing on you. So, and as far as the medical treatments go, some very interesting things. Tell us about what you're doing with stem cells or the V cells, for example. I just think it's fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're I'm pleased to say that we're the first veterinary hospital in the world, really, that is using this particular type of stem cell therapy. It was developed by a physician in Southern California named Todd Ovakaitis. The man is absolutely brilliant, in every sense of the word. And what he has developed is a stem cell procedure that harvests stem cells from the patient's own blood that can then be administered back to them, either intravenously or directly into the area that needs to be treated, like a bad joint or something of that nature. And there's a couple of really big advantages to doing that. Number one, unlike other stem cell procedures, there doesn't have to be a surgical collection of stem cells because it's just as easy as a blood draw. So it makes the procedure quicker, cheaper, less stressful and painful on the animal. So it's kind of win-win in that way. The results we've seen have been very, very promising. More comfortable joints. Preliminarily speaking, we've seen an animal that had significantly improved cardiac function. We've seen older animals have more energy and, that are moving around a lot easier. So it's a really, really wonderful procedure. We're now, in fact, I just had a conversation this morning with a veterinary cardiologist to start putting together a pilot study looking at treating dogs with a very specific type of heart disease with stem cells. So that would be something that, conceivably we would get published so we can really start to show the veterinary community at large, what this procedure really has to offer.
Wow. Yeah, and there's really no downside to it from what I've seen. I mean,
yeah, I mean that's the great news about it. I mean, you're giving the patient their own stem cells,
yeah,
so there's no risk of rejection or negative reaction there. And because there's no surgical collection, there's no anesthesia, there's no concern in that sense. So legitimately, the worst case outcome in a procedure like this is nothing happens.
yeah.
So in the sense of above all, do no harm, it definitely checks that box.
Well, and the benefits from the stem cells are just phenomenal. I mean, that's one of the 9 hallmarks of aging is stem cell exhaustion. And if
Yep,
you can turn that thing back, it changes the entire environment.
it does.
And so you're using it on cats, dogs. Are there any other animals that you're using it on?
I mean, at this point, we've just used it on dogs and cats. I think that there's enormous potential in other species as well. Just hasn't really been done. But, I'm sure that's a matter of time.
Yeah, that's exciting. And especially with the clinical study. I mean, because then it will get into human studies. And I think it
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the exciting part about it, because I mean, as you know, the Western medical community, for better or for worse, is very, very married to a double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trial.
yeah,
That's sort of the gold standard. And it's good news, bad news, but to be able to provide something like that, to the Western community, that's what makes them sit up and pay attention.
yeah.
Show them a bulletproof study that shows real efficacy, especially when it comes to a disease where there is no effective Western treatment. People
Yeah.
will pay attention.
Yeah. Well, and especially with the double-blind placebo-based trials, animals, there's no placebo-based. They either get better or they don't. It's not like they're going to be fooling you. Say, I feel great,
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the nice thing. And one of the reasons why we've chosen this particular type of heart disease as a model is because it is something that can be objectively measured through a cardiac ultrasound.
Right.
So like you say, there's no placebo there. Either the heart function got better or it didn't.
Right.
End of story. Like there can be no misinterpretation there.
Yeah. No, I think that's brilliant. And then what are the primary peptides you guys are deploying with your patients?
Yeah, so I mean, it's early days peptide wise, but some of the ones that I've seen positive effect with, particularly BPC 157, has been very good. CJC and ipamorelin again, so things that I think are probably front of the shelf in your office for patients as well. I have not gotten nearly as far down the road with peptides as you have with your patients, but I mean, I'm looking forward to getting there. But I mean, the reality is I mean, peptides are nothing more than signaling molecules, and those things really are conserved from one species to the next. So I think there's every reason to expect that those things will be effective in animals. They have not really been researched thoroughly, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I think that's where, what you're doing in the veterinary world. I've seen patients of mine be just as devastated, if not more so, when a pet passes away. It's almost more stressful for them. And so adding a few good years of life is priceless, not only, obviously for the pet, but also for the humans that, care so much about them. Because like you said earlier, they're part of our family.
No, it's true. And you make a good point that I mean, a lot of people take the loss of a pet harder than they will the loss of a family member. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, like, what human in your life are you getting unconditional love from? I don't have anybody. So I mean, for people, especially, I mean, people's lives are high stress these days. And to be able to come home and know that there's some adorable little furry thing at home waiting for you to love on you, no matter how crappy your day was, no matter what you did or said to somebody else, that's all forgiven. There's no way to put a price on that. To be able to be able to take part in giving people more time with these pets, I mean, it's a great privilege.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. So Gary, what's your favorite pet growing up? Was it a dog, a cat?
That's a funny story because I did not have a lot of pets growing up.
Oh,
My father was allergic to cats, and I never could quite convince my parents to let me get a dog. Um, I had a gerbil for a while.
okay.
I had goldfish. It really wasn't until I got to college that I actually owned a dog. But yeah, I mean, my first real dog was a Shih Tzu named Elliot, and he was such a good dog.
Mm,
Such a great little muppet of a dog. And he sort of, yeah, he kind of started me down a whole road of owning cute little furry dogs. I love big dogs. I've never owned one, and I feel like they may be more than I have time for in my life to deal with. It's another
mm.
one of those like pick your pet wisely to fit your lifestyle kind of things. It's also another reason why I love my job, because I get to play with and love all over these big giant dogs, and then they get to go home with somebody else.
Oh, cool.
So I
Yeah.
win.
That's great. Do you have pets right now?
I have two dogs, Sammy and Marty. They are also Shih Tzus. They're brothers.
Okay, so that's the breed that you like.
That tends to be, yeah, the breed du jour of the family. And like you, I had a very, very old cat who recently passed.
Mm,
Frida we don't really know for sure how old she was, but she was definitely north of 20.
wow.
Yeah, that just happened a few months ago, but she led an amazing life. She was a great kitty. And it was wonderful to sort of have her as long as we did.
Rita, yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, and Gary, you're doing amazing things in the longevity space. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. If there's like three core pieces of advice you could give to pet owners so that they can have their pets with them for as long as possible and as healthy as possible, what would those three pieces of advice be?
I think they would be, number one, feed a properly balanced, fresh, whole food diet, whether
Yeah.
you're buying it or making it. That has got to be key. Make sure your pet is getting an appropriate amount of exercise.
Mm.
And lastly, and these are the kind of statements that sometimes get me into a little bit of trouble. Um, Look at Western medical care with a little bit of a critical eye. What I mean by that is a lot of pets are really, really dramatically over vaccinated.
Mm.
And that really can take its toll on an animal. So what I often recommend people do is, ask questions of your veterinarian. Ask them respectfully. But like if your pet is on the calendar due for several vaccines, it's a good time to have a discussion about how much do they really need this vaccine, and is there an alternative
Mm.
to not giving it? And these, like I say, I mean, ask these questions respectfully. And if you feel like you're not getting an answer, or your veterinarian seems a little bent out of shape about being asked a question like that, maybe it's time to find a different veterinarian.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. So, and what's the best place for people to reach out to you?
So, I mean, depending on what you're looking for, I mean, from the standpoint of food and supplements, that would be ultimatepetnutrition.com.
Yep.
If people happen to be in the San Francisco Bay Area and they wanted to bring their pets in to see me, or if you're willing to travel, holisticvetcare.com is my office website. And then for just some more information about me and books and whatnot, drgaryrichter.com.
Beautiful. And make sure we'll provide links in the show notes, and make sure you get longevity for dogs, longevity for cats. And not only for you, but I think about that book as a gift. And I'm just like, there's so many people I could easily gift that book to, because, I've seen it in our pets too. Once we change the diet, and it's like, man, it makes such a big difference give them a little peptides, go a little acupuncture for them. And there's not a lot of people doing what you're doing in the veterinary world. And so my hat's off to you, Gary, for being such an innovator. Thanks so much for being on the show. Any final things that we should talk about that we haven't covered today?
I mean, I think we've covered most things. I think what I would leave people with is it's never too early or too late to start practicing preventative care. So even though everything seems like it's fine, do something now.
Man, I love that. Yeah, even if your pet's, brand new, coming out of, heading into adolescence.
Yep. Now's the time.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Gary, thanks so much for all the amazing work you're doing, and can't wait to get a hold of your new books, Longevity for Dogs, Longevity for Cats. For those of you who have pets or have people who also have pets who you love, make sure you send them a link to this show. And I appreciate everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.